have might pick up on the ceiling, and we should be good to go for our public access. So if you do speak, I just request you speak up clearly and loudly so that the mics can pick us up. So we are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission. It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. And we have a quorum of everyone in attendance except for Jim Force. The first item is to approve the meeting minutes of June 4th, 2024. Entertain a motion from Watson, second by Robinson. Any questions, any changes? All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Item 2 is Director's Report on Utility Operations. I'll turn that over to Eric.
Thanks, Mayor. The first two items are just talking about the lead service line replacement, our current project, and then our funding application for 2025 and what's being proposed. So I wanted to make sure that the commission was up to speed on what we're applying for, and then also kind of where we're at for this year's for the loan closing with that. So the DNR wasn't ready to close on those loans earlier. And so we went through CIP, have started uploading all of our documents. I think we're down to the point we just need the financials uploaded. I think probably the quickest we could close that would be in August at this point. But it may get pushed to September. It just depends on if we make the August city council meeting with the financial assistance agreement and all the other documents. But that's the timeline that we're on. For lead service line replacement, that did begin this week, the actual installations. So they are on the southeast side starting on Kent Street, and then they will be working over to Eau Claire Boulevard and then through the 2 remaining census tracts after that on the southwest side. So with a plan to replace about 700 or so this year, which is quite a bit more than what we had predicted with the costs and the bids that we received. So, if anyone has any questions on the director's report and any of the other items that are on here as well.
All right, thank you. We'll file that report and move on to number 3, discussion and possible action approving a lead service line replacement ordinance. And in your package, you'll find the ordinance under tab 3. We have, this is probably over the last couple of years, several iterations into this. So what the approach was to try to keep it as general as possible, so that it would give us flexibility moving forward. Not currently knowing all of the details on the grant financing that are going to be available and timelines moving forward. So we are required, as we talked about, as part of the grant application process, we do get points for an ordinance, and the ordinance also assists the city in defining process for residents, and it makes it easier for the city to complete this task. So hopefully that hits the sweet spot here, so it meets our requirements. And I'd like to see us take any cracks at this today and get it moved on to council for consideration, so we can meet our October application deadline. So if we really need to chew on this some more, we probably have that time, but we're running out of time if we send it to council and then they have things. So with that, I would open it up for comment. Mr. G.
I read through it. Is this on?
Well, we don't have it today.
When I read through it, I saw a statement that said customer's meter. but I couldn't find it in this draft, so I don't know if that's already changed. But it's true, it's the meter at that home, but I would just leave a generic meter. Follow what I'm saying? It shouldn't be the customer's meter, because it sounds like he owns the meter.
Okay.
And I couldn't find it in here. The other thing was, there was discussion about galvanized giving off lead. And I wasn't certain that was correct, but I went online and apparently it can do that, so I think that's fine. But maybe there should be a statement in the ordinance that speaks to that this ordinance does not apply to internal plumbing. Just so that somebody says, well, you're going to change all my plumbing, lead or whatever, and I think there should be a statement to that effect. But that's, otherwise I was pleased with it. I think it's pretty clean and straightforward. So in the end, I would support the ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, you had some potential comment.
I have a couple of questions. Some of it gets into authority. So this is an ordinance that will be adopted by the city council that would convey to us authority to basically set the priorities for the replacement without council approval. And do we want to have, subject to confirmation by the council in here, or is the commission operating independently? And I'm thinking if we go down the route of not having sufficient funds on the private side, we do a special assessment. Does this commission have the ability to impose special assessments as a financing tool? I'm just trying to look through the mechanics and not looking for someone to challenge us because our processes aren't right. So I don't know, has the city attorney had a chance to look at the processes? If we get down and get into the situation where on the private side we go with a 5-year special, is that an action of us or the council?
I don't know, but we did address it that it will be it is a homeowner's responsibility.
Right, and we have responsibilities for homeowners to pay for other improvements, sidewalks, curb gutter, other things, and we allow specials to go into that. Are you anticipating, does this ordinance need to create that flexibility, or is it inferred or conveyed elsewhere in the municipal code that if someone had an extraordinary amount of a run that would be very expensive from the curb stop into their home, would we allow for that to be covered under a special assessment?
I think that's the existing ordinance, but truckers, you can answer that.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, you want to know whether or not someone's going to be getting a special, like an extension if there's more issues, or like what exactly are you asking?
I guess I'm asking the question is, we're conveying in the with the
Which
lack of
portion are you
avail-
looking at?
I'm looking at under the financing of replacement under 1366-080,
Mm-hmm.
and it says the property owner shall be responsible for the remaining balance.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for a special assessment in
Yeah.
that situation?
Yeah, I think they call it a special charge because it's a private side, but that next paragraph says the city may establish a program to provide financial assistance to property owners. So that leaves, that ability open, which would have to be approved by council. council, right? So if the city was gonna set up a loan repayment or a special charge or something like that, that would be determined, maybe a recommendation from the commission onto council. But the council, when it comes to finances and financials and things like that, they're the ones who are gonna make the decisions, just like other special assessments would be for this. That would be the intent of this. That if there's a program in place, that the council would establish that program. Yeah.
So you're comfortable that we have the authority to do that?
So it would be like Eric just said, the council would make the final decision, so that would only come into play if the city, by the council or through the council, established a program to provide financial assistance. So then at that point, the council would be delegating that authority to you at that point. So it's not something that's set in place right now. We may or may not establish it. And that's something that the council would establish.
So
And I think Eric wanted to add on to what I just said.
That's at least the intent, is that it leaves it open for the city to establish that from year to year. The other part of that is that when we applied to the DNR funding, like for year 2025, we're anticipating that the census tracts that we're using and the properties that we're applying for, that we're gonna get 100% principal forgiveness for the private side, okay? So then the city wouldn't, there wouldn't be a charge to the homeowners for that, right? But on the public side, when you look at the split that we're having, the public side would be the $5 million that we're, unless the DNR has principal forgiveness to put towards that as well.
if I'm a low-income individual in a
Yep.
non-low, outside of
Right.
the qualifying census tracts, I could be looking at a $4,000 assessment, $1,000 assessment.
You could, yes.
And
Yep.
I think therein so the authority, the implied authority is that the council could run those projects through the special assessment process. Now, in the ordinance, we have a provision, there's a provision that upon notification, they've got 30 days in which to coordinate with the city. That you take a much longer period of time relative to the special assessment policy. Are those consistent, or is it implied that when we provide that notice to the property owner that they are responsible for the private side, that they would have an extended period of time relative to the special assessments to put that in place?
Right, so however that, that financial plan is set in place by the city council, right? So if we're working and let's say a property owner through the funding is only getting 50%, right? And it's a $4,000 replacement, so they're responsible for $2,000, right? So however that financial plan, whether it's a special charge to them, and the city council establishes that, yeah, you have 5 years to pay it back, or you have, however that is, depending on the cost. And if there's other funding that comes into play and things like that, then we would establish that. But I think that's on a year-to-year basis, that may change just because the funding, amounts may change.
Yeah, so if you look at this year's, we're roughly 2/3, 1/3. So a resident could, if we were charging, it would be roughly $1,500 over 5 years, it'd be $300 a year potentially, through that low interest loan. But since we can't predict what it's going to be in 3 to 5 years, I think this is the best link. The other thing that will potentially happen is we may slow this down to where we're not trying to push 5 years, maybe it's 10 years. So those variables will all change. Gives us that flexibility.
So the commission will be the scheduler of work. Subject to, I didn't read any subject to council approval, because the commission, if they set the priorities of the projects, will the council need to approve that project list?
Well, I think-
I want to make sure that we've got the process defined and understood.
Yeah, I mean, like how it really works right now is that, the commission sets priorities for projects, right? But the council ultimately establishes the funding for it, right? So if the commission wants to do a project like we do with the capital projects, but the council isn't willing to support that in the budget, then those projects don't happen, right? So ultimately, it's the council who determines the financial side of things.
But I don't see that in the ordinance.
So,
Then
What are you
need-
looking at? What section?
Well, you referenced guidelines for consideration of, you've got all these references to the commission setting the priorities under
What section are you looking at?
replacement schedule under 1366-060 replacement priority established by the Water Works Commission. And so. subject
Right,
to-
so that's the schedule. And like Eric was saying, if you're gonna get financing for this replacement schedule, then they would have to go, you would still have to go through council for that. So while it's not written in the statute, that's how our procedure works.
because the commission doesn't have authority to borrow money or
Is it-
establish financing.
Is it possible, I know that the state, and they don't like to do it, but will sometimes with rules and administrative rules will put notes in that clarify that. So if I'm a person looking at this, I have an understanding that the commission recommends a priority subject to funding made available through the council or approval.
Well, I mean, I think later on, if you look at paragraph B, it says that it's gonna be at a scheduled accordance with local, state, and federal law. So I think that kind of refers you back to the council is going to be the one who gets the ultimate say. So while it's not specifically written in this ordinance and in this specific section, that is the process that is required for this commission to follow based on what your commission, what authority you have under our statutes. So this ties into the authority that you're given in our own municipal code statutes, and from those statutes, the authority that you have that's been granted to you by the council, you have that, but then you still have to follow through with what the council did not grant you authority to do. So this is just one piece in an entire set of statutes and ordinances.
I guess what is your concern, John? I'm trying to understand.
So
we can
I
try
guess
to address it.
I spend too much time as a regulator. You like to cross-reference in other things, so you're throwing out an ordinance that's sort of standing on its own, that is tied into others for authority. It's not consistent, maybe a line like consistent with the underlying city ordinance would be helpful, so we can make reference and direct people back to that whole issue of it. My fear is that you would get to a situation where, let's say Kent Street, Eau Claire Boulevard are outside of it in southwest Wausau. We were in a situation where they got it free in southwest, those two census tracts. In Eau Claire and Kent Street was asked to pay an assessment, all of a sudden they challenged it under due process and equal treatment. I want to just make sure that we've got some sort of mechanism where we've closed the loop and we clearly have spelled out the authorities for what the commission can do and what the council can do, should there be a challenge in the future.
Well, it's hard to unring the bell, but it was the council's direction to go that route, or it was someone's direction, I don't know. But the front page of this indicates potential for $60 million. The council would have to approve that if we didn't have funding. We also have our lead service testing, which could trigger a different schedule. So if we decided to delay or to not go with a 5-year plan because we don't have funding, and we still have a test trigger that puts us on a 10-year track. So there's some moving parts here, and I would say, yeah, consistent with other ordinances or state and federal regulations, might be a catch-all, but we've we're also trying not to put undue burden on residents. If we don't have the funding, that we can slow the roll a little bit if we have to. But I would defer to city attorney if we want to add that, but I think we can, if it helps clarify.
So that would, I mean, are you looking, that would probably be something, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, under the financing of replacement? I mean, so right now it says the second paragraph says we may establish a program to provide financial assistance to property owners, replacing customer side lead water service lines. And, I mean, we could add subject to public funding availability or something like that. What do you think, Eric?
Well, I think that the language that we chose was the city may establish, and by city, you know, it really references back to the city council, right?
Yeah.
And then all of the funding that is requested or taken on by the city has to be approved through the city council under resolution. That's part of the state and federal requirements for taking on those loans. And so, if I'm understanding your concerns correctly, I think that just by the nature of the process, that the council is ultimately the decision maker on this, you know, as it comes to financing and those. Now, to answer your question, that are there gonna be people saying, well, they over there, they got it 100%, and then these people over here only getting 50% paid for? Yeah, that's gonna happen, you know. And so, unless the city council wants to put additional money towards, you know, those project costs, but, yeah. So, from a legal standpoint, I mean, I think that the city council, I mean, they make these decisions all the time, right? Like special assessment, I mean, they change special assessments from when we did projects under CDBG. It was a lot lower than right. You know, so I guess I reference back to those types of things, but
Well, as long as you're comfortable, and I think can't be the dialogue on the record, that
Yeah.
there is that cross-section is good.
Well, it's a good point because it is going to be a topic of discussion. Why did we do it here? Why aren't we doing it there? And there's several reasons for it. We can get into that. It's really going to come down to appetite and budget to pay for it.
And I will say that I had, you know, like in our lead service line replacement program that we have right now, right, with CIP, Community Infrastructure Partners, I brought them together yesterday with Horsley Witten, who's the LSL Accelerator Program, right? So that we can begin establishing a broad public outreach, you know, that we need to start later this summer. As far as, and this could be part of the education piece in that. So that will start with health risks for lead, and it'll start with how EcoFlow works with the city, and then ultimately how the program is rolling out from year to year, right? Just to try to start educating from abroad, so that there's more people than just those people in the census tracts that are seeing this, that, you know, this will broaden out through the rest of the city over the course of the next few years. But I mean, I think to your point that I think the education and outreach piece has been slow to roll out. We've been doing it, but it's been very focused in certain areas because of the timelines. And I think we need to do a much better job of broadening that out and having more communication out there. And I think that will help. But I still think, you know, to yours and the mayor's point, that we're still going to have, you know, complaints and concerns about some people getting it for free and others possibly having to pay. So.
One other shift that we're going to do, and we talked about this last time, was we're going to focus more on city side, areas that have city side, and do both city and private side, so we can get more lead out in one operation. We're not allowed to do partial replacements. That's also covered in the ordinance, but it's also code that we can't do partial replacement. So that should help us, and it'll take the burden a little bit off of those sitting out there wondering, what am I gonna be forced to do this? If they don't have a city side lead, they probably won't be hit for the first couple of years, but, we'll shift that plan to get more lead out with the money that we do have. Any further comments?
Are you looking for a motion? I move
I would accept a motion to
approve the lead service line replacement ordinance as drafted or modified, because I think there might be some modifications to go to council.
So we have a motion with some modifications. Did we record them correctly? Or I shouldn't say correctly, but
Cross-reference.
cross-reference, do we need to read that again?
I have that there was a typo somewhere that said customer line instead of
Yeah, it's on
page 3.
under customer side water service. There's something, it said customer's meter there.
Customer meter, I couldn't find it.
Okay,
So just,
I think it just be should be generic.
Okay.
Okay.
I see what you're saying.
all right. So that was a typo, and then a statement that it doesn't apply to all plumbing, just the lead water service.
All plumbing in
Right.
building, or, because it could be home, or could be business.
Maybe just up to the water meter.
Well, you can say it that way too. You follow what I'm saying? It has to be really clear that somebody can't say, I want my plumbing replaced in my home. And I've heard people complain about that, but I said, that's not the program. The program is for the water supply line from the curb stop to the meter. So however you feel comfortable saying that, I'm okay with it.
Maybe should we, I don't know, just double check that definition.
Yeah, we can,
Okay.
we'll work that one out.
Okay.
Okay, so then the motion from Gene includes the reference to the meter versus customer meter, the home or building, exclusion of that plumbing consistent with ordinances, and anything else. I'm gonna get a second for that. Second from Watson. Any further discussion, recommendations? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries, we get to move that along. That'll go to our July 9th meeting, council.
Certainly okay with
All right.
Okay,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
Before we, so, does, while you're up there, does the definition of lead service line address Joe's other point? It means a water service line made of lead or galvanized steel. This term can apply to the customer water service line, public side water service line, so we're only having this ordinance apply to the lead service lines. So that may be the way to catch that.
So you're saying on page 3, under the definition of lead water service line, that we just say the second sentence, the term can apply to the customer side lead water service line?
No, I'm just,
Or what are you
I think
saying?
what Joe was concerned, we not take that beyond the meter into the home.
And it was never intended to be done anyway.
And so
Okay.
can we use that as the sort of the definer? The ordinance applies only to the lead service line,
Well, you can't quite say lead because
or to the,
galvanized.
Well, there's
So
a-
under our definition
But this
of
is-
lead, we include galvanized,
it says galvanized steel or any
so.
lead pigtail, gooseneck, or other things.
So is that part good enough for what the concern was about building?
I will defer to Eric as the person who knows these terms better than
I
most.
think we'll make it consistent with what we do with the customer side water service line definition further up on the page. So we changed it from the customer's meter to water meter, you know, to the curb stop, and I think we'll try to incorporate the definition for the lead water service line, try to establish that piece, you know, that goes up to the meter and not beyond that. Yeah, so we have it defined. So good point. We'll make those consistent.
Well, there's a table in there that also discusses the service line material and what's required on either side. So there's a number of combinations that are in there. Okay, thank you. We got item 4, discussion and possible action on the 2023 PSC report. Kind of a thick report, and I would defer to Eric to highlight that.
Sure.
I think talk a little bit about this, where some of the shortfalls were, but Eric, you want to highlight that?
I think, you know, when it comes for the financials, you know, Mary Ann's here, if you have any questions on the financials. Sure, I think, just in case there's questions, Mary Ann, thank you. The other thing that's in here too is, you know, over the last few years, there's been some additional things that have been added, like age of water mains, and then also our inventory with water service lines, and that continues to be just kind of a living document. And it will be, as years go by, it'll be more and more updated as we go through the lead service line replacement project as well, because we'll be changing every year, so it's going to be more of a living document. We also had, you know, return on rate-based computation in here, and then, you know, but this does outline what our sales of water was, as well as our calculated water loss that we see. And so if there's any questions on this, there's a lot of information in here, I realize, so.
I'm happy to touch base. I'm happy to touch base with just some highlights too, if you'd like, in addition to what Eric's
Yeah,
provided.
Yeah.
Do you want me to?
Sure, why don't you give
Oh,
us some
sure.
highlights?
Okay, so I guess, you know, obviously July 1, we implemented a significant rate increase, and we did see that in our outcome for 2023. I guess, first of all, backing up, you know, this was our first year on Workday, so we had some big changes in how to extract data. We also had big changes because we had a new water plant, so it was the first year for the water plant, so like comparables were difficult to find. And then I guess finally we had turnover of the lead accountant that managed the utilities, so we had some loss of institutional knowledge there. So it was a challenging year to produce the PSC, but we, you know, were able to get the information that we wanted to out of Workday, and we're excited for next year because we're going to be way better prepared for doing the report. And I think, as Eric said, every year they're adding additional information that they want, and we're going to fine tune and hopefully do more detailed information. So, like, starting out on page F1, which is your income statement, you can see that revenues were $10.1 million compared to $7.5 million. So we did see about a 2.6% or $2.6 million increase in our revenues. But when you look at operating expenses, we also saw about a $1.2 million increase in operating expenses that were for a variety of things, you know, like, and there's more detail about what is all in the operation and maintenance expenses, but, you know, chemicals were a big part of that. I think there was a lot of just little things that needed to be added for the plant, for, you know, getting everything up and running. So the net income was $2.9 million versus $1.4 million. Kind of cruising down the report, you can see miscellaneous non operating income, which this year is 1.1 million, last year it was 1.3. That basically is the contributions from the city for your project. So it's basically contributed plant, so it's not like real cash. So then, looking down at the actual net income of 3.1 million versus 2 million from last year, so it's up about $1.1 million. And like I said, that 1.1 million of miscellaneous income is contributions to the plan. If we kind of keep on to the report a little bit further to page F7, which is the balance sheet, the one thing I wanted to point out is that cash has continued to be a struggle for the water utility. So at year end, your operating cash was a deficit of $147,000 compared to $923,000 at the end of 2022. And I think, there was a significant investment in assets, particularly in meters, about $800,000 worth of meters, and radios were purchased in 2023, and there was no real financial offset for that. So that, helped drain the cash balance, and we are monitoring that on an ongoing basis, and it's been hovering in that small negative amount. Obviously, our debt increased from 2022 to 2023. First of all, we took out that $17.5 million interim financing for the GAC, which we're actually closing on the permanent financing. What day is today? Tuesday, on Thursday of this week. So we'll have that in place, and if you remember, we will ultimately need to borrow less money than we initially thought, so that's good news. But that's taking place this Thursday, and we did see an increase in our safe drinking water because we were continuing to make final payments, and the engineering was kind of lagging, so we were making engineering payments during the year. So we did see our safe drinking water loan go up. Again, as Eric pointed out, there is a rate of return in here on page F23. It is 4.23% versus 3.02 of last year. So we did see a little bump in our rate of return. Again, hopefully for a full year of rate this year in 24 will help us kind of gain our cash position back to a positive rate. And let's see what
Before you
else.
leave that area,
Excuse me.
well, when the rates were set by PSC, what was the goal?
6.5, I think they allowed us.
But that should improve with a full year of
Yes.
income.
Yep, because we only had a half year here. And I think too, we have paid out on some more meters at our meeting yesterday. We thought about another $200-some thousand so far this year in meters. So again, I think that is probably our biggest challenge because we're borrowing or getting principal forgiveness for our street projects, the mains, and then obviously we have debt financing for the GAC. So really, it's those meters that are really creating kind of a cash drain on our available cash. And I think if you recall, we postponed the advance payment back to the sewer utility to try to help with cash. And I think, this is, I guess, maybe a justification for that delay because we are allowed to charge the sewer because the sewer is benefiting from those meters as well because their income is based on water usage, and so that meter reading is important to the sewer utility. But the PSC governs the process that you go to allocate those costs to the sewer utility, and really they're paying a depreciation rate over a 20-year period, so they don't have that upfront cash commitment. And then we're able also to allocate 50% of our collection activity, our billings, those kinds of things. But, you know, that advance then, if we needed a justification for it, would be to help defray the cost of meters, if nothing else. And let's see, what else was I gonna talk
I think
about?
one thing, Mary Ann, it's important to note too, like when, a few years ago, I think in 2018, or we changed over meters, right, from that
Oh, yes.
to census. And our goal was is to do increase our meter exchanges throughout the city, because we have very old meters out there that weren't reading, right? So our meter reading's not accurate, our water usage is not accurate. So we're losing revenue on an annual basis. And when we started ordering those meters, and then they became hard to get because of the manufacturing and stuff shut down. So that was a couple of years. We had, I don't know, it was 8,000 meters on order or something like that, and those just carried over. Now, all of a sudden, last year and going into this year, all of those meters have started coming to market. And that's why we've had such a large influx last year, and we're getting more now, rather than spreading it out over, 5-6 years. We're
Right.
kind of getting them all within a couple
Yeah.
of years.
And I think in addition to the fact that of the revenue loss that is eliminated with the new meters, it also is going to provide additional information. Because once census is in, people will be able to go in and monitor their water usage, like on a regular basis live, right? Because they'll be able to see that. If we wanted to move to monthly billing, we'll be able to do that once we have those
Right.
census meters in place. And so I think, it obviously was a very important decision for the utility to make, to move in that direction. It's just, again, one of those things where everything kind of hit at one time as far as capital needs. The other point I wanted to make is on W7 is the tax equivalent. So, the PSC goes through a formal calculation of what the taxes that the water utility would pay to the city, and that is based on an average plant in service as well as the tax rates. And so that formal calculation came out to 1.8 million. The city did defray some of that and only allocated 1.5 million. In August, Ellers is going to be coming here to kind of go through some financial projections with the city and, look at ways that we could perhaps continue to decrease that pilot payment. Obviously, I have my hands in both of the city's pockets, the utility pocket and the city pocket, and have to balance both budgets. So, if you take from one, then the other pocket is lighter. So I think that's going to be the big challenge, is just, because all arms of our government are being affected by inflation and cost demands. So, but that's happening in August. So we'll be coming to the meeting in August with Ellers.
One thing, when you see the money that's borrowed,
Yeah,
those two bonds, they're gonna be paid off in 2027.
yes.
That's really good news. I didn't
Yeah.
know that we had a payment that's gonna end soon. That's gonna free up a lot of available cash.
Well, and it provides, every time we make a payment, it provides room, because we are, again, borrowing money for the 2024 projects, because it's not all principal forgiveness for those 3 projects, so, unfortunately. And the good news that the GAC is less, so that's really good news. And those rates are really much better rates now that we could get out on the market versus, particularly because interest is high.
This stuff is applied at the very end, but I think there's a typo error on the number of employees between.
Okay, there you go.
It's under workforce diversity,
Oh,
page 1 of X1, and on page 1 of Schedule F17, it says, no, I'm sorry. On schedule 06, F06, it's 31, unless we hire up 10 more employees.
Well, are you thinking for water and sewer though?
No, this should only be water. There might be 31 for both utilities.
No, it should be,
Do you-
21 isn't accurate either, though, is it?
No.
Or
21.2.
unless some of that's from up in the front desk there.
I think it's the allocation of
Okay.
employees that are working on.
Because I think that Monica had told me that before this was submitted, she made a correction.
Okay.
I don't know which one.
Okay.
She changed, because
Well, I
I
can
don't know
check
what
on
the
that.
total, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
The only other point is meter, or water loss.
Oh, yeah.
I think last year was under 10, and I see this year jumped to 16 or 17%.
Yeah.
But I know it's a transition year, so that's probably part of that.
Oh,
Well, I think we do have, I think a lot of it has to do with the meters. Like Scott had said, they had just changed out a meter from, what, 68? Yeah. And then we have a lot of meters that were changed out in the early 2000s that are really no longer reading. So I think this is the first year we've actually done shut-off notices to get into homes to do meter replacements. So we just had to go down that route because people just weren't responding. But then we will get complaints because they obviously haven't been paying their appropriate water bill. And now when the new meters go in there, yeah.
I know what my usage should be. My bill hasn't changed, it's never
Yeah.
gone down to zero.
Yeah.
If it does, let us know. Mr. Robinson.
Can I pick up on that? You know, so our water loss went up, should it go down with the new meters?
Well, I think because you were, Scott can speak to it better than I can, but you have meter, we always had suspect of the water meter leaving the plant, wasn't it?
Yeah, which is the other piece of that.
So-
Yeah.
We've been working on trying to be more accurate in what we use for water at the facility. So the water at the new plant, those meters are accurate. We tested them after the first year, they remained accurate. We started using more metering on our processed water. So if we are running the lines for freezing and stuff like that, we're putting a meter on it. So we're getting a lot more accurate numbers in there. Just trying to hone in on where our issues could be. Our reporting's gotten a lot better. So there's only a couple variables left, and meters are probably one of them. We have a lot of meters that were put in 2012, 13 that are reaching that 10-year, 12-year lifespan, and we have a large failure rate in the last couple of months. We've been looking at a lot of that more, and there's a very large meter failure rate that we're going through right now. Hence why we're putting more meters in. We couldn't get them for a couple of years, so we had that decision to switch and go to a better reading system. Then we had COVID, where we couldn't get into homes, 2.5 years or so. Then everybody ordered meters during that time, and then tried putting them out at the same time. And we just, 2 years ago, we had 8,000 meters on order, and we just got 2,500 between the last half of last year and the first part of this year. So we've been kind of holding on to those to see what we're going to do with the lead service line replacement program. We don't want to go into people's homes and not replace the meters at that time. They're getting a new service line. We want to put a new meter in at that point. Couplings are getting hard, so meter elbows are getting hard to find. So we have a bunch of those on order that we're not receiving. So a lot of the timing is just not working out. And like Marion said, our cash flow is low, but we got to take the items when we can get them.
So is the water loss not necessarily a distribution system failure or leak, but
Correct. We're suspecting more loss through the meters in the residents or homeowners than we are.
so
in the
under-reporting
distribution.
of volume? Then I had another question under the water conservation programs. We don't put the rain barrels in there, should we be? And what are other utilities doing other conservation programs?
Eric, you asked about that. PSC told us not to put it in there. It wasn't a major enough program to even know another.
standard now? You don't wanna be above 15%, right? Or is it lower?
No, 15% is still good.
So we're not that far from that, even though we were below 10, if I remember correctly, in previous reports.
We definitely want to step up our replacements if we can. So if we are, we can talk about this, but it would definitely, I mean, we're kind of tiptoeing around certain things like what Scott said. If we know we're going to come in with a lead service line, is it pay to replace? You know, you've got issues with meters in pits. It could cost a homeowner $300, $400, $500 to replace that. And we come in a year later and put in a lead service line replacement. So we'll have to weigh those out. We're going to want to chip away and try to get that under 15. I think we should be in single digits. I mean, if we're under reporting, we're really under recovering. But if it's a leak, that's another issue as well. But all right, further comments?
Thanks, Mary.
Yeah.
Mary? All right, number 5, update from the Regulatory Affairs Seminar on becoming regulations. That was a seminar you attended.
Yeah. So last year in '23, I attended this, was on a panel for speaking about PFAS and how the city of Wausau had, our pursuit in addressing PFAS. This year it was focused on lead service line replacement, so there was 4 different municipalities, all kind of taking different approaches to lead service line replacement. So we were on a panel discussion as well. The nice thing about this seminar is that there's a lot of agencies that we usually do not hear from. And so hearing what their perspective is on how they're, like the ASDWA, they're the ones who actually kind of tell the DNR what to do, right? That is our regulatory authority. So kind of hearing above what might be coming down. I think my key takeaway from hearing from all of these agencies is that there's going to be no shortage of additional regulations coming down on the water utility, which all deals with economics, right? And so the big push right now is cybersecurity. That is going to be an additional cost to the utility, both water and then it would make sense to do wastewater as well. And so those are happening. They're not exactly sure how that's going to happen yet, but that will be coming down probably in the next 12 to 18 months, that there possibly be some requirements. I also think that they're also, the DNR, the EPA is going to continue looking at these regulations, whether it's lead and copper rule, with the improvements coming down, whether it's disinfection byproducts coming down, there's just going to be more and more investigation and regulations coming down. And so some of these agencies feel that these need to happen, but all the municipalities that were there were pushing back and saying you're inundating our users with costs that we cannot keep up with, right? Users cannot continue to foot the bill for these types of things as they, because they're accumulating at a huge rate, especially here in Wausau. So I guess time will tell on how quickly these new regulations come down, but as of right now, there's no shortage or slowing of proposed legislation.
Mr. Robinson?
So where are the pinch points or the risk points relative to cybersecurity? Just because we're so automated, just shutting the system down?
Yeah, I think it's really the remote access, right? Like, so if we allow our operators, rather than to come in when they're on call, that they'll have a pad and they can remote access in. We allow some of our consultants to do it, to do updates with our SCADA system and other programming if we need it. I think those are really where some of those vulnerabilities lie. There could be others, but I'm not a cybersecurity. But they're gonna require an assessment, and then they're gonna require a cybersecurity plan. And what the DNR has told us is that the EPA wants to regulate that. The DNR's not happy with that because they regulate the utilities. So I think there's a little bit of friction there between the feds and the state. And the other thing with the DNR is that they say that they don't want to house these documents because they feel it's an open records and anybody would have access to them. So they're not exactly sure how they're going to regulate it and make sure everybody gets it done, you know, and how that is going to be established. So that's one of the holdups on the issues. Anybody have any other questions? Okay. I mean, as we know more, I'll continue to provide updates, but I think some of these seminars are good for you to understand what's happening at both the federal and state and other levels.
The world we live in, we have threats, we need to address them.
Right.
Thank you, we'll file that report. And item 6, discussion of possible action establishing a day and time for the monthly Wausau Water Works Commission meetings. I don't know if we sent out that information or not, but we had a request to look at this, and we have, did we put this in the packet for no? Okay. I can summarize that because court meets in this room, there are times that we cannot, it's like 7:30 this morning would not be a good time because court meets here. We could meet anytime after 10. If we were to do it on a Tuesday, Thursday, we could meet here at 7:30. We have 7:30 to 10 open. Mondays and Fridays are generally open, but we do have Police and Fire Commission usually meets here at 7:30 on Monday. So we kicked around the idea of trying to do a 7:30 meeting, or potentially like on a today, Tuesday, we could do like a lunch hour, noon hour, 11 to 12:30, 11:30 to 1, something like that. That may be more accommodating. Any thoughts on that?
I don't care about the time as much as I prefer to have it earlier in the week, just like it has been for Tuesday, but that's my personal preference.
So is it every third or fourth Tuesday? Which one? First Tuesday?
Yeah.
Okay, I was wrong all around. Yeah, so that, the lunchtime on Tuesdays would work like 11 to 12:30, as long as it didn't conflict with the WCDA. That's what I was asking. They meet on Tuesdays at the fourth Tuesday.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Different Tuesday.
So that would be perfect.
So you would prefer, what was the time frame again?
Did I think you said something about a lunch hour?
Right, right.
Like 11, 12:30, you
Yeah.
said?
That'd be 11 to 12:30? Okay. I think we could arrange that. Any
Is that the
objections?
first Tuesday then?
First Tuesday.
It would be the same meeting day, we would just move it to an hour and a half, so, or no, we move it an hour.
Then we're good with that, but as far as the council chambers, we're good.
This, Board of Public Works does meet,
We can change that. That's
Okay.
easy. Yeah.
okay. So 11 to 12:30, if that's okay, do we need a motion on that? Agree by consensus?
You okay with that, John?
All right.
First Monday?
First Tuesday.
First
First Tuesday.
11 a.m. right here. 11 a.m. to 12:30.
So the Parks Commission meets weird times, but sometimes it's the first Tuesday. So it meets at 10:30.
Meets that way.
10:30 to noon, but it's not always the first Tuesday, but that's how they meet.
Okay.
It does last like the first Tuesday.
Okay. And as far,
The first Tuesday before the first Thursday of the month.
Oh, it's an oddball one, sure. Well, let's see if this works. Gina will record it and we'll put that out in the next notice for the meeting. Any other thoughts on that? Any hanging chats?
So we would actually be looking at Gina, right, August 6th, would be the first Tuesday of August.
Yeah.
So it has been cut off. It's okay for the 10. I have the photo for the 10:30. 11 to 12:30.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay,
The first one is good, August
very
6th.
good.
August 6th is the next meeting, 11 o'clock to 12:30 right here. That brings us to the final item. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion from Watson, second by Jean.